You deserve to lose that hair.
Professor Everett Halden held Imani Vale's severed locks above her desk while the class stared in silence.
Maybe now you'll learn that professionalism matters more than making a statement.
He snapped the scissors open again. Imani stayed seated, hands folded over her notebook.
You want respect in my classroom?
Halden leaned closer, smiling like he owned the room.
Then let your work speak louder than your appearance.
A few students laughed nervously. Imani looked straight at him.
You had no right to touch me.
Halden dangled her hair in front of her.
I just taught you the lesson nobody else had the nerve to teach.
Imani didn't blink. He had just humiliated the one student whose last name could put him before a federal judge. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning air was cold and sharp when Imani Vale pushed through the heavy glass doors of Aldrich Hall. Her breath came out in small white clouds. Her boots made clean, steady sounds on the polished floor. She was early. She was always early. She carried a thick folder of research notes pressed tight against her chest. Weeks of work lived inside that folder. Surveys, case studies, carefully written arguments about how cultural identity shapes the way students learn and grow. She had read every source twice. She had checked every citation 3 times. She was ready. The hallway outside room 204 was already crowded with graduate students standing in small clusters. Low voices, nervous energy, the kind of quiet that happens before something unpleasant. Nolan Pierce leaned against the wall near the door, his coffee cup held with both hands like it was keeping him warm. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with light brown hair that fell a little over his forehead. He caught Imani's eye and gave her a tight smile. "You ready for the Halden experience?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "I've been ready since Thursday," Imani said simply. Nolan exhaled through his nose. He made Tara cry last semester, in front of everyone. Just completely tore apart her thesis proposal word by word. He shook his head. "Guy's a nightmare wrapped in a blazer." A few other students nearby laughed softly. Nervous laughter. The kind that doesn't mean anything is funny. Imani adjusted the folder in her arms. She had heard the stories. Every graduate student at Bellcrest had. Professor Everett Halden was legendary. Not in the good way. He had published 12 books. He had won 3 national teaching awards. His name was on 2 campus buildings. And he had spent the last 30 years convincing students that cruelty was education. She had told herself it wouldn't happen to her. She had told herself that if she came prepared, if she was sharp and calm and professional, he would have nothing to grab onto. She believed that. She really did. Room 204 was a mid-sized lecture space, with tiered rows of seats curving around a central floor area. The walls were a dull cream color. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. A long demonstration table sat at the front of the room covered with psychology props. A stack of behavioral conditioning textbooks, a small model of the human brain, a metal tray holding miscellaneous classroom items, scissors, a ruler, rubber bands, tape. Nobody paid attention to the tray. Students filed in and took their seats. Imani sat in the second row, close enough to be taken seriously, far enough not to seem aggressive. She opened her folder and reviewed her first page one more time. Her locks were pinned up neatly, wrapped around each other in a clean, elegant shape at the back of her head. She had spent extra time on them that morning without fully understanding why. Professor Halden arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. He didn't walk into a room. He occupied it. He was tall and broad, with thick silver hair swept back from a wide forehead. His face had deep lines carved into it. Not the soft kind that come from laughing, but the hard kind that come from years of looking down at people. He wore a dark blazer over a pressed shirt, no tie. He carried nothing. No notes, no bag, no coffee. He never needed notes. He set both hands flat on the demonstration table and scanned the room slowly, like he was taking inventory of everything inside it. "Someone is presenting today," he said. "Not a question." "Yes, Professor." Imani raised her hand slightly. "I am." His eyes moved to her and stopped. "Come down." She stood at the front of the room and opened her folder. Her voice was steady. She introduced her topic clearly. Cultural identity as a framework for understanding learning outcomes in underserved school communities. She explained her research design. She cited her sources. She was good. She knew she was good. Halden let her speak for about 90 seconds. Then he started circling. He moved slowly around the outer edge of the room at first, hands clasped behind his back, head tilted just slightly, like a man listening very carefully. But his face said something different. His face said he was already bored. "Stop," he said. Imani stopped. "You're attached to this material." His voice was smooth, conversational, like he was pointing out that she had a spot on her shirt. "I can hear it in every sentence. This isn't research. This is personal advocacy dressed up in academic language." "The research supports the conclusions," Imani said carefully. "The data comes from—" "I'm not talking about the data." He moved closer now, toward the front of the room, toward her. "I'm talking about you, the way you're standing, the way you're holding that folder. You're protecting it, like it's alive." He stopped a few feet away and studied her face. "That's a problem." The room was very quiet. He shifted his gaze upward, slowly, deliberately. His eyes moved over her locks. "Tell me," he said, "is this a style choice or a statement?" Imani felt the air change. Something cold slid down the back of her neck. "My hair is not part of my presentation," she said. Halden smiled. It was a thin smile, patient, in the way a cat is patient. Everything about a person is part of their presentation. He began walking around her now, a slow half-circle, his voice picking up that smooth, lecture hall rhythm he used when he was about to say something he'd clearly been waiting to say. "Those," he gestured loosely toward her head, "those are markers, symbols, little flags you plant in the ground before you even open your mouth. They tell a room what you want them to think about you before you've earned the right to make that impression." Someone in the back row shifted uncomfortably in their seat. "They're called locks," Imani said. Her voice was flat, controlled. "They're called ego," Halden said simply. "And ego is the enemy of objective thought." He stopped circling and faced the class. "Today we are going to do something different. Something instructive." He raised one finger. "An exercise in detachment." He turned toward the demonstration table. Nobody moved. Imani watched him reach toward the metal tray, watched his hand close around the handle of the scissors. Her brain didn't believe what her eyes were seeing. Not right away. Not fast enough. "This," she started. He was already behind her. The sound was small. A dry, whispering snip. Then another. Something heavy and warm dropped onto the open pages of her research folder. The room made a sound, not words, just air. A collective intake of breath from 22 people all at once. Imani looked down. A section of her locks lay curled across her notes like something sleeping. Dark and soft, and completely, horribly out of place. Somewhere in the back rows, someone laughed. A short, broken sound. Uncomfortable. Shocked. Then silence again, sharp and suffocating. Nolan Pierce sat perfectly still in his seat. His coffee cup was on the desk beside him, forgotten. His face had gone white. Without fully deciding to, his right hand slipped into his jacket pocket and closed around his phone. He turned the camera on under the desk. He pressed record. His hands were shaking. Halden set the scissors down on the demonstration table with a soft click. He brushed his hands together once, lightly. He looked at Imani the way a man looks at a project he has just completed. "Now," he said, his voice perfectly calm, "perhaps you can learn who you are, without the performance." He turned to the class and continued speaking as if he were discussing something from a textbook. The definition of behavioral conditioning, the relationship between identity and perception. His voice filled the room like it always did, certain, smooth, and completely in control. Imani did not scream. She did not cry. She stood completely still for a long moment, staring at what rested on top of her research notes. Then, very slowly, she reached down with both hands. She gathered the severed locks carefully, gently, the way you would hold something that mattered. Her fingers were trembling so hard she could barely feel them. She closed her folder over her notes and her papers and the pieces of herself that now lived inside it. She picked up her bag from the floor. She walked toward the door without saying a word. Her boots made the same clean, steady sounds on the floor that they had made when she arrived that morning. But everything else was different now. Everything in the world was completely different now. The door closed behind her. Inside room 204, Professor Everett Halden kept talking. The campus was loud with the normal sounds of a Monday morning. Backpacks swinging, sneakers on concrete, groups of students cutting across the wide green quad, laughing and talking without a care in the world. Imani walked through all of it like she was invisible. Except she wasn't. People noticed her. A girl near the fountain nudged her friend and pointed. Two guys on the steps of the library went quiet as she passed. The rumors moved faster than she did. She could feel them spreading around her like ripples in water. Eyes tracking her. Voices dropping low. She kept walking. Her folder was pressed tight against her chest. Inside it, her research notes. Inside it, the locks Halden had cut from her head. She could feel the weight of them through the cardboard. Small and impossible, and real. She found the women's restroom on the ground floor of Carver Hall. She pushed inside. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, cold and white. She checked the stalls. Empty. She turned to the mirror. She looked at herself. The left side of her hair sat uneven now. One lock shorter than the rest. Raggedly cut, not tapered or shaped. Just severed. Gone. Like something had been chewed off. Her face crumpled. She grabbed the edge of the sink with both hands and let it happen. The tears came fast and ugly and without any dignity at all. She pressed her lips together to keep from making noise, but the sobs pushed through anyway, shaking her whole body. She had held herself together for the entire walk across campus. She had kept her back straight, and her chin up and her eyes forward. She had given them nothing out there. She gave it all in here. Her reflection stared back at her. Mascara running, eyes red and swollen. Half her beautiful locks still hanging where they had always been, and the other side broken. She opened her folder with shaking hands and looked at what she had carried across campus. She had grown those locks for 7 years. She had started them at 16, during the year after she got sick. Really sick, when her body had felt like something that belonged to someone else. Growing her locks had been her way of taking herself back. Every inch of them meant something. Every single one. And he had cut them off in front of 22 people and called it a lesson. She pressed the severed hair against her chest and cried until she couldn't breathe. Nolan stood outside the restroom door in the hallway. He hadn't planned to follow her. He had just ended up there, moving on autopilot, driven by something he couldn't name yet. Guilt, maybe. Or something worse than guilt. The kind of sick, hollow feeling you get when you know you watched something awful happen and did nothing to stop it. Except he had done something. He had laughed. Not a real laugh. Not a happy one. Just a short, stupid sound that came out of his mouth before his brain could stop it. But it had come out. It had been real. He stood in the hallway with his back against the wall and his phone still in his jacket pocket, and his coffee long forgotten somewhere behind him. He could hear nothing from inside the restroom. That felt worse somehow. He had expected shouting or anger. The silence felt like something breaking quietly. On the other side of campus, in the narrow faculty corridor outside the Behavioral Sciences office, Professor Everett Halden stood with his arms crossed and a small, satisfied smile on his face. He was talking to Dr. Prentice, a tenured colleague who had been at Bellcrest for nearly as long as Halden himself. "Students today need discomfort," Halden said, his voice relaxed and certain. "They've been coddled into believing that feeling safe is the same as learning. It isn't. Never has been." Dr. Prentice made a vague sound. Not quite agreement. Not quite objection. Halden didn't seem to notice. "She'll be stronger for it," he said. "They all are, eventually." Inside the restroom, Imani had stopped crying enough to breathe. She turned on the cold tap and pressed wet hands against her face. She stood up straight. She looked at herself again, harder this time. She reached into her bag and found her phone. She scrolled to her father's name. Dad. She stared at it for a long moment, her thumb hovering. Then she pressed call. It rang once. She hung up. She could not do it. She could not be the daughter who called her powerful father to fix things. She had always refused to be that. She had come to Bellcrest on her own merit, kept her last name quiet, and built everything here herself. She wasn't going to let Halden take that from her, too. She put the phone back in her bag. The restroom door opened behind her, and she spun around, ready to ask for privacy. The woman who walked in was older. 50s, maybe. She wore a Bellcrest maintenance uniform in dark gray, and she was pushing a small supply cart. Her hair was silver-streaked and natural, pulled back neatly. She had warm brown skin and calm, dark eyes that took in the whole situation. Imani's tear-streaked face, the folder clutched to her chest, the uneven hair, in about 2 seconds flat. The woman stopped pushing the cart. She didn't say, "Oh, my goodness," or "Are you okay?" or any of the things people usually say when they don't actually want to get involved. She just looked at Imani steadily and said, "Baby, what did they do to you?" Her voice was soft, direct, like someone who had seen hard things and wasn't afraid of them. Imani opened her mouth to say nothing, or "I'm fine," or "Please just leave me alone." Instead, without deciding to, she opened the folder and held it out. The woman looked at the severed locks for a long moment. Something moved across her face. Not shock exactly. Something deeper and older than shock. "I'm Marisol," she said quietly. "I clean this building." "Imani." Marisol nodded slowly. "How long did it take you to grow these?" 7 years? Marisol closed her eyes for just a second. Then she opened them and said, I used to do hair, professionally. 15 years in a salon before I came here. She paused. So I know what this is. I know exactly what this is, and it is not small. Don't let anybody in this building tell you it's small. Imani felt fresh tears hit the back of her throat. She swallowed hard against them. You cannot stay in this bathroom, Marisol said. Not unkindly. Just plainly, the way someone tells you a true thing. Hiding in here means he wins today, and you do not look like somebody who loses. Imani stared at her. Slowly, she closed the folder. She tucked it back against her chest. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Okay, she said. They walked out together. The hallway was not empty. A cluster of students stood near the vending machines. Imani recognized 2 of them from other departments. She didn't know their names. They looked at her when she came out, then looked at each other, and one of them, a girl in a yellow hoodie, said something low to the others that made 2 of them laugh. Whole thing was probably staged anyway, for attention. Right? Like, relax, it's hair. Nolan was still leaning against the wall 10 feet away. He heard every word. He looked at the group by the vending machines. Then he looked at Imani walking beside Marisol, her back straight and her jaw set, pretending she couldn't hear them. He felt something turn over hard in his stomach. His phone was still in his jacket pocket. He could feel the weight of it. He was starting to understand that this was not going to just go away. That evening, after the last classes had emptied out and the campus had gone quiet, Marisol drove Imani away from Bellcrest in her old tan Civic, heading toward a small neighborhood salon she knew on the other side of town. The salon smelled like coconut oil and old magazines. Rain drummed against the front windows while Marisol flicked on the lights in the back room. The mirror stretched across one wall, surrounded by empty styling chairs that looked tired in the fluorescent glare. Imani sat down in the center chair and stared at herself. The damage was worse than she had realized. Halden had grabbed a thick section near her left temple and hacked through it with dull scissors. What remained hung in jagged pieces, some locks barely attached, others cut so short they stuck out at angles. The rest of her hair looked wrong now too, unbalanced and broken. "Can you fix it?" she asked quietly. Marisol moved behind her and lifted the damaged sections carefully. She examined each one with the focused attention of someone who understood hair as more than decoration. After a long moment, she shook her head. Not tonight. Maybe not ever, the way he cut them. She met Imani's eyes in the mirror. Locks need time to heal properly. These would take months to repair, and they'd never look the same. Imani's reflection stared back at her. She looked like someone who had been attacked, someone who carried evidence of another person's cruelty on her body. "I don't want to walk around like this," she said. "Then don't." Marisol opened a drawer and pulled out electric clippers. She set them on the counter next to Imani's chair and waited. "It's your choice," Marisol said. "You can try to hide what he did, or you can decide what happens next." Imani looked at the clippers, then at her damaged reflection, then at Marisol, who was watching her with patient understanding. She picked up the clippers. Across town, Nolan sat on his dorm room bed with his laptop open and his phone in his hands. The video played on a loop. He had watched it 17 times now. Each time, he noticed something new that made his stomach turn harder. The way Halden had smiled right before grabbing the scissors. The way he had positioned himself so everyone could see. the way he had dropped Imani's hair like garbage. This was not impulsive. This was not pedagogical experimentation. This was deliberate humiliation designed to break someone in public. And Nolan had laughed. His phone buzzed with a text from his roommate asking where he was, but Nolan ignored it. He opened his laptop and created an anonymous account on the university forum. His hands shook as he uploaded a 15-second clip, just the moment when Halden grabbed the scissors and cut. He typed, "This happened in behavioral sciences today. Professor Halden cut off a student's hair in class." He hit post before he could change his mind. 20 minutes away, Halden sat at Murphy's Tavern with 3 other faculty members, a half-empty whiskey in front of him. The conversation had moved from department politics to teaching methods, and Halden was holding court. "Students today expect constant validation," he said, gesturing with his glass. "They think education should feel comfortable. But real learning requires discomfort. It requires breaking down false attachments." Professor Martinez from the English department nodded along, but the younger psychology professor, Dr. Kim, looked uneasy. "Discomfort is one thing," Dr. Kim said carefully. "But what happened today seemed necessary," Halden interrupted. "That girl was so wrapped up in identity performance she couldn't think clearly. Sometimes you have to cut through the nonsense literally." He laughed at his own joke. Martinez chuckled nervously. Dr. Kim stared into her beer and said nothing. At 12:47 a.m., Imani ran her hand over her newly shaved scalp. The salon chair was surrounded by 7 years of locks, thick, beautiful sections that had taken patience and care to grow. Now they lay on the tile floor like memories. But when she looked in the mirror, she did not see a victim. She saw someone who had chosen. "How do you feel?" Marisol asked. Imani touched her bare head again. "Different, but not broken." Marisol smiled and began sweeping up the hair. "Good, because broken is what he wanted." They drove back to campus in comfortable silence, rain still pattering against the windshield. Imani felt lighter somehow, like she had left something heavy in that salon chair along with her hair. At 1:03 a.m., she climbed the stairs to her apartment and unlocked her door. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter where she had left it hours earlier. The screen was lit up with notifications. Hundreds of them. Tuesday morning hit Bellcrest University like a storm. By 7 a.m., the 15-second video had been shared across every campus social media page. Students huddled around phones in dining halls, dormitory lounges, and lecture halls. The footage was grainy but clear enough, Professor Halden grabbing scissors, cutting Imani's hair while she sat frozen. "Holy crap! Did you see this?" Voices echoed through crowded hallways. "That's actually assault, right? I heard she's pressing charges. I heard she's just looking for attention." Local news stations began calling the university's communications office before 8 a.m. The receptionist's phone rang continuously. Imani walked toward her education policy seminar with her newly shaved head held high, but every step felt like walking through fire. Students stared openly. Some whispered support. Others looked away uncomfortably. "Stay strong, girl," a black sophomore called out near the library steps. But behind her, 2 white students muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's totally milking this. My professor touches my shoulder all the time. Should I call the news too?" Imani's hands clenched into fists, but she kept walking. In Professor Williams's education policy class, she tried focusing on curriculum reform discussions, but every few minutes, someone's phone buzzed with notifications. Classmates kept glancing at her. The professor himself seemed distracted, clearly having seen the footage. "Miss Vale," he said gently after class, "if you need accommodations this week—" "I'm fine," Imani interrupted, gathering her books quickly. She was not fine. Across campus, Nolan sat in his constitutional law lecture, unable to concentrate. His anonymous post had exploded overnight. Students were sharing screenshots, tagging friends, demanding answers from administration. But he had more than just that 15-second clip. During lunch break, Nolan walked to the campus center and found the activist group's bulletin board. He pulled out his phone and sent the full 7-minute recording to the email address listed under Students for Justice. The complete footage showed everything. Halden's deliberate targeting, his cruel comments, the way he circled Imani like a predator before attacking. Now, the whole truth would come out. At 2 p.m., Imani received a text message that made her stomach drop. "Please report to Provost Norbury's office immediately. Administrative Assistant." The Provost's office sat on the 3rd floor of Bellcrest's imposing administration building. Rich mahogany furniture filled the space. Diplomas and awards covered one wall. Dr. Celeste Norbury, impeccably dressed in a navy blazer, gestured toward a leather chair. "Imani, please sit. I am so sorry about what happened yesterday." Norbury's voice carried practiced sympathy. Her expression looked concerned, almost maternal. Professor Halden's methods were unconventional, but I want you to know the university takes this seriously. Imani sat rigidly. "Good, because what he did was assault. I understand your feelings completely," Norbury continued smoothly. "That's why I'm offering immediate solutions. We can arrange private counseling through our wellness center, enhanced academic support, even a modest settlement to cover any therapy costs." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Of course, this would be confidential. We both know how media attention can harm everyone involved. Students, faculty, the institution. Sometimes quiet resolution serves justice better than public spectacle." Imani stared at her. "You want me to stay quiet." "I want you to heal," Norbury corrected. "Professor Halden used poor judgment, yes. But destroying careers over teaching mistakes helps no one." "Teaching mistakes?" Imani's voice rose. "He cut off my hair in front of 20 people." Norbury's sympathetic mask slipped slightly. "Imani, I'm trying to help you here. Filing formal charges creates a he said, she said situation. It becomes about your word against a tenured professor's reputation. That rarely ends well for students. Are you threatening me?" "I'm protecting you." Norbury's tone grew colder. "From making choices that could damage your academic future permanently." Imani stood up abruptly. "I want accountability. I want him fired. I want this investigated properly." Norbury's expression hardened completely. "I see. Well, that's certainly your right." Her voice turned ice-cold professional. "Though I should mention, we've received concerning reports about your recent behavior. Disrupting classroom environments, creating hostile situations for fellow students. These matters require behavioral review." Imani felt her blood chill. "What are you talking about?" "Academic standing reviews can be complex processes. They affect everything: assistantships, fellowships, degree completion timelines." Norbury smiled without warmth. "I hope we can resolve this amicably." Imani turned and walked out without another word. In the hallway, she pulled out her student ID to swipe into the graduate assistant office. The red light flashed. Access denied. Her hands shook as she tried again. Access denied. pending behavioral review. Evening shadows stretched across campus as Judge Solomon Vale's black sedan pulled up to Imani's apartment building. He had driven 3 hours from Chicago without calling ahead, without informing anyone at the university of his arrival. He climbed the stairs to apartment 2B and knocked gently on the door. Imani opened the door to find her father standing in the hallway, his usually composed face etched with concern. Solomon Vale had always been a man of few words, but when he saw his daughter's shaved head for the first time, he simply opened his arms. She collapsed against his chest, finally allowing herself to cry freely. "Tell me everything," he said quietly after several minutes. They sat on her small couch while Imani recounted every detail: Halden's circling, the scissors, the laughter, Norbury's threats. Solomon's jaw tightened with each word, his hands clenching and unclenching. "Dad, I know what you're thinking," Imani said when she finished, "but I can't use your position. This has to be about what he did." Solomon was quiet for a long moment. "Powerful institutions destroy people who challenge them publicly, Imani. They have resources you can't imagine. Then what am I supposed to do? Stay quiet while he targets someone else next semester? No," his voice carried steel. "We fight smart." Across campus, Nolan stared at his phone screen in growing panic. Text messages flooded in from classmates who had figured out he leaked the recording. "You ruined Professor Halden's life, traitor. Hope you're proud of yourself, snitch. Watch your back." Meanwhile, Halden's smooth voice filled radio waves across the city. "What people don't understand is that modern education requires discomfort. My classroom methods have been misinterpreted as something sinister when they're actually educational theater designed to challenge assumptions." The host pressed him. "But cutting a student's hair without permission was a demonstration of how external identity markers can limit intellectual growth. My students understand this. Unfortunately, social media has distorted a pedagogical moment into something it never was." By 10 p.m., national news outlets had connected the dots. CNN's Kyron read, "Professor cuts black student's hair. Victim's father is federal judge." In Norbury's office, her phone rang constantly. Board members, major donors, alumni threatening to withdraw funding. "How did we not know who her father was?" demanded Board Chairman Robert Whitmore over speakerphone. "She never disclosed it," Norbury said tightly. "Used her mother's maiden name on applications. This is a disaster. Judge Vale has national respect. If he goes public supporting his daughter—" "He won't," Norbury interrupted. "Judges maintain impartiality. He can't use his position for personal matters. Are you willing to bet the university's reputation on that assumption?" The emergency board meeting convened at midnight. After 2 hours of heated debate, the vote was unanimous. Suspend Halden temporarily while developing strategies to minimize damage. But privately, several board members were already planning how to discredit Imani publicly. Wednesday morning brought chaos to Bellcrest University. News vans lined the main campus entrance while protesters gathered outside the administration building. Their signs read, "Justice for Imani" and "Fire Halden now." Halden appeared on 3 morning talk shows by 9 a.m., flanked by expensive attorneys. His message stayed consistent across interviews. "This is cancel culture at its worst," he told one host smoothly. "I've dedicated my career to pushing students beyond their comfort zones. Now, emotional reactions and social media mobs are destroying innovative education." Another interviewer pressed harder. "You physically cut her hair without consent." "I created a learning experience about identity attachment. My methods are unconventional but effective. Ask any of my former students who've gone on to successful careers. Bellcrest's official statement appeared on their website by noon. The university takes all concerns seriously and is reviewing the incident thoroughly. Professor Halden remains suspended pending investigation. We cannot comment further on ongoing matters. The statement said nothing, took no responsibility, promised nothing concrete. Imani's phone buzzed constantly with vicious messages. You destroyed a good man's career over a haircut. Typical entitled behavior. Playing victim for attention. Hope you're happy ruining someone's life. Solomon sat beside her at the kitchen table, methodically screenshotting every threat. Document everything, he said grimly. These people reveal themselves. At 2 p.m., Nolan texted her. Can we meet? I need to tell you something important. They met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from campus. Nolan looked exhausted, guilt written across his face. I recorded it, he said immediately. The whole thing. Imani stared at him. You had evidence and said nothing? I was scared. I laughed when it happened because I froze. I'm a coward. Her anger exploded. You laughed while he humiliated me. Then you stayed quiet. I know. I hate myself for it. Your guilt doesn't fix anything. Nolan flinched, but didn't defend himself. After several tense minutes, Imani's rage cooled slightly. His regret seemed genuine. Why are you telling me now? She asked. Because other students are scared of him, too. They might know about past incidents. That evening, Nolan's email arrived with 3 anonymous testimonies from former Bellcrest students describing disturbing experiences with Halden. Thursday morning brought heavy clouds over Bellcrest. Solomon had booked a hotel suite 3 miles from campus after reporters discovered Imani's apartment building. They sat at the dining table with laptops open, reviewing testimonies Nolan had forwarded. The stories made Imani's stomach turn. A Latina graduate student from 2019 wrote, Halden mocked my accent every class. He'd make me repeat words while other students snickered. Said my pronunciation showed cognitive limitations. I dropped out junior year because I couldn't take it anymore. Another testimony came from a black engineering student. Halden sabotaged my scholarship recommendation in 2020. Told the committee I was academically promising but emotionally unstable. I lost funding and had to transfer schools. Solomon read silently, his jaw tightening. This wasn't random cruelty. It's a pattern. A third testimony revealed the most damaging information. Bellcrest settled a lawsuit with Halden 3 years ago involving another minority student. The administration made her sign NDAs to keep it quiet. Everyone knew, but pretended it never happened. They knew, Imani whispered. They protected him. Solomon's calm demeanor cracked. They enabled a predator for years. At the university, Provost Norbury held emergency meetings with department heads. Her message was clear. Defend institutional integrity at all costs. Professor Halden's methods may be unconventional, but destroying careers over misunderstandings serves no one, she told faculty. Public statements supporting academic freedom would be appreciated. Dr. Rebecca Marsh, a younger psychology professor, sat uncomfortably during the meeting. Afterward, she contacted Imani anonymously. I have heard complaints about Halden for years, her message read. Administration always buried them. They care more about grant money than student safety. That afternoon, campus activists organized a solidarity rally. Dozens of students gathered in the main quad, many shaving their heads symbolically. The emotional support temporarily lifted Imani's spirits. "You're not alone," they chanted. Justice for Imani. Late Thursday night, her phone buzzed with an official email from Belcrest disciplinary officials. Formal accusations of creating institutional disruption. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. Imani walked through the glass doors of Belcrest's disciplinary hearing office, wearing a dark blazer and pressed slacks. Solomon walked beside her, straight-backed and silent. Their attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Okafor, carried a thick folder under her arm. Faculty members lined the hallway outside the hearing room. Not one of them made eye contact. They looked at the floor, at their phones, at the ceiling, anywhere but at Imani. She noticed. She kept walking. The hearing room was small and deliberately uncomfortable. A long wooden table dominated the center. 5 university officials sat on one side with neat stacks of papers in front of them. The air smelled like old coffee and carpet cleaner. Dean Morris Pratt led the panel. He was a thick-necked man in his early 60s with small eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He waited until everyone was seated before speaking. "Miss Vale," he said her name like it already annoyed him. "You understand this hearing addresses your conduct regarding the public distribution of classroom recordings and its effects on campus operations." Imani sat very still. "I understand you called it that." "Yes." Patricia placed a calm hand on the table. "We're prepared to respond to all allegations." Pratt cleared his throat and shuffled papers without looking up. "The university has suffered considerable reputational damage as a result of materials released online, materials that originated from inside a private academic setting." "A private academic setting," Solomon repeated slowly, almost quietly. Pratt ignored him. "Miss Vale, it has been suggested that your inflammatory response to a routine classroom exercise directly provoked the harassment Professor Holden has since received online. We take that very seriously." Imani's jaw tightened. "Routine classroom exercise." "A demonstration," Pratt said, "one that in hindsight may have lacked appropriate boundaries, but a demonstration nonetheless." A woman beside Pratt, Associate Dean Linda Farrow, leaned forward. She wore a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Imani, is it possible you misunderstood what Professor Holden was attempting to accomplish? Sometimes teaching methods that feel surprising in the moment are actually designed to produce growth." The room went silent. Solomon's hand pressed flat against the table. His knuckles went pale. He breathed slowly through his nose, once, twice, like a man choosing every word before allowing it to exist. Patricia spoke first. "Are you suggesting that having scissors taken to a student's body without consent is a misunderstanding?" Farrow's smile tightened. "We're suggesting context matters." "The context," Imani said, her voice low and controlled, "is that a man grabbed my hair and cut it off while 30 people watched. That is the context." Pratt leaned back in his chair. "Miss Vale, your emotional investment in this matter is understandable. However, the university's position is that Professor Holden's conduct, while perhaps inappropriate in execution, does not rise to the level of assault. What does rise to concern is the deliberate orchestration of public outrage that has disrupted academic operations, threatened donor relationships, and endangered faculty safety." "Endangered faculty safety," Solomon repeated. His voice was so quiet it was almost more frightening than shouting. "Professor Holden has received death threats," Pratt said. "My daughter received scissors to her scalp," Solomon said. "Without warning, without consent, in front of a classroom full of people." Pratt straightened his papers. "Judge Vale, Your presence here today is noted. However, this is an internal academic proceeding, and your personal relationship to the student does not. I'm here as her father, Solomon said. Nothing more. The hearing continued for another 90 minutes. Every question was designed to reframe Imani as the aggressor. Every answer Patricia gave was met with bureaucratic deflection. By the time they walked out into the gray morning air, Imani felt hollowed out. The reporters found her immediately. 3 cameras swung toward her face the second she stepped outside. Imani, do you regret leaking the video? Was this a setup against Professor Halden? Sources say you've had conflicts with faculty before. Can you respond? Solomon stepped forward with one hand raised. No comment. A reporter shoved a microphone inches from Imani's face. Is your father using his judicial connections to pressure Bellcrest administrators? Patricia guided them firmly toward a waiting car. Imani kept her eyes forward. She would not give them anything to use. That same morning, Halden's legal team released edited footage online. The clip was 40 seconds long. It cut the classroom recording to show Imani smiling seconds before the incident, removing all context. The caption read, "Full context the media won't show you." Within hours, opinion online shifted dangerously. Comment sections filled with voices calling the incident staged. Blog posts appeared with headlines like, "Did Bellcrest student manufacture outrage for attention?" Nolan watched the edited clip from his dorm room with his stomach in knots. He knew what really happened. He had the full recording. But fear was doing its work on him too. Then he walked outside to his car. All 4 tires were flat. A single note sat under the wiper blade. It read, "Keep your mouth shut." His hands shook as he took a photo of the note. Then he texted Imani one word: threatened. That evening, Marisol brought food to Imani's apartment. Rice, beans, and warm bread in containers wrapped in a dish towel. She set everything on the kitchen table without fanfare and sat down across from Imani like she belonged there. "Eat first," she said. Imani picked up a fork, but mostly pushed food around her plate. "They want you exhausted," Marisol said plainly. "That's the whole game, baby. Make you so tired you stop fighting. Make you feel like every step forward costs too much." She broke off a piece of bread. "Powerful people don't beat you with strength. They beat you with time. They wait for you to give up." Imani looked up from her plate. "You're still here," Marisol said. "That already terrifies them." Near midnight, Imani's phone rang from an unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail. She answered. A young woman's voice, trembling and barely above a whisper, came through the speaker. "Is this Imani Vale?" "Yes." A long pause. Then, "My name is Deja Morris. I was a student at Bellcrest 4 years ago." Another pause, longer this time, filled with the sound of someone working up enormous courage. "I have recordings, real ones. Things Halden said that his lawyers can't explain away." Her voice cracked. "I've been too scared to use them. But I can't keep watching what they're doing to you." The diner sat off Highway 47, 20 minutes from campus. Chrome stools lined a counter that had seen better decades. Coffee stains marked the Formica tables. Imani arrived first, choosing a corner booth where she could see anyone entering. Talia Redden walked through the door at exactly 8 in the morning. She looked older than 28. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the uniform of someone working retail. Everything about her posture screamed exhaustion. She spotted Imani immediately and walked over without making eye contact with anyone else. "Thank you for coming," Imani said, as Talia slid into the booth across from her. Talia nodded, but said nothing. She kept her hands folded on the table, fingers picking at her cuticles. The waitress brought coffee without being asked. Small-town diners worked that way. Talia wrapped both hands around her mug like she needed the warmth. "I saw what he did to you," she said finally. "On the video. I kept thinking about how calm you looked afterward. I could never stay that calm." "I wasn't calm," Imani said. "I was broken." Talia looked up for the first time. "Yeah, that's what he does. He breaks people. Then he makes them think it's their fault for being fragile." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old phone. The kind with actual buttons and a tiny screen. "I kept this after I dropped out," she said. "Never got rid of it because I knew someday I might need what's on here." Imani leaned forward. "I was in his social psychology course. Spring semester, 4 years ago." Talia's voice got quieter. "He targeted me from day one. Said my accent was unprofessional. Made me repeat answers until I sounded educated enough. The class would laugh because he made it seem funny." Imani's jaw tightened. "Then he started calling on me every class. Made me stand up to answer questions. If I got nervous, he'd make comments about my appearance. Said anxiety made people look untrustworthy. The other students stopped sitting near me because they didn't want him to notice them." Talia pressed a button on the old phone. The screen lit up. "One day after class, I stayed behind to ask about my grade. I was failing even though I knew the material. He started explaining how certain types of students don't belong in academic settings." She scrolled through old files. "I turned on my recorder because I thought I might need proof later. I was right." She found the file and pressed play. Halden's voice filled the quiet diner, clear and unmistakable. "The goal isn't to teach you psychology, Miss Redden. The goal is to teach you your place. Students from your background often mistake access for belonging. Breaking that delusion early prevents larger disappointments later." Talia's younger voice, shaky and confused. "I don't understand what you mean." "Of course you don't. That's precisely the point. Breaking students psychologically creates obedience. Obedient students don't challenge authority, they're not equipped to understand. It's actually kindness, though you lack the sophistication to appreciate that now." Imani felt sick listening to it. "There's more," Talia said. She fast-forwarded through the file. "Here." Halden's voice again, colder now. "I've been perfecting these methods for years. Pain teaches humility better than any textbook. Your panic attacks aren't a bug in the system, Miss Redden. They're a feature. They prove the lesson is working." Imani stared at the phone in horror. "He was proud of it," Talia whispered. "He enjoyed watching me fall apart." Meanwhile, back on campus, Provost Celeste Norbury paced her office like a caged animal. Someone had leaked information about past settlements to reporters. Internal documents were appearing in news articles. Her career was crumbling in real time. She'd already fired 2 administrative assistants on suspicion. Now she was hunting for the source with the desperation of someone watching their life's work collapse. Her phone buzzed constantly. Board members, donors, lawyers, all asking the same question. How bad was this going to get? She didn't have an answer they wanted to hear. At the same time, campus security officers cornered Nolan outside the library. They demanded his phone and laptop, claiming university property rights during investigations. Nolan clutched his devices closer to his chest. "I'm not giving you anything without a warrant," he said. "This isn't a criminal matter yet," one officer replied. "It's academic discipline. Different rules." "Then call my lawyer," Nolan shot back, surprising himself with his own defiance. The officers backed off, but barely. They followed him across campus like vultures waiting for weakness. That afternoon, Solomon sat across from Imani in her apartment living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, but the mood remained heavy. "You shouldn't have had to survive this alone," he said quietly. Imani looked up from the legal documents spread across her coffee table. "Dad, no, listen." Solomon leaned forward, his judicial composure cracking. "I taught you to keep your head down. I taught you that dignity meant enduring injustice silently. I thought I was protecting you from a world that punishes black women for fighting back." Imani felt tears threatening. "I was wrong," he continued. "All those years, I was teaching you to be the perfect victim, to make it easy for people like Halden." "You were trying to keep me safe," Imani said. "I was trying to keep myself comfortable," Solomon replied harshly. "It's easier to tell your daughter to stay quiet than to face the fact that the world might never change." They sat in silence for a long moment. "But you're not staying quiet," Solomon said finally. "You're braver than I ever was." Later that afternoon, attorneys from the National Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund held a press conference outside Bellcrest's main gate. Television cameras captured everything as they announced a formal federal complaint against both the university and Halden personally. The lead attorney, a sharp woman in her 50s, spoke directly into the cameras. "This case represents systematic abuse disguised as education. Professor Halden's actions constitute assault, harassment, and civil rights violations. Bellcrest University's response demonstrates institutional complicity in that abuse." Reporters shouted questions about settlements and past incidents. "We have evidence of a pattern spanning multiple years and multiple victims," the attorney continued. "This was not an isolated incident. This was policy." The headlines wrote themselves. Saturday evening, Halden watched the news from his apartment with disturbing calm. The federal complaint played on every channel. His photograph appeared next to words like assault and systematic abuse. His attorney, Richard Crane, sat across from him reviewing damage control strategies. "We need to prepare for more victims coming forward," Crane said. "The federal complaint will embolden others." Halden sipped his wine slowly. "Let them come," he said quietly. "I've spent years building credibility. These people are emotional, unreliable witnesses with obvious agendas." His voice carried cold certainty. "By the time I'm finished, no one will believe a word they say." He looked directly at Crane. "I'm going to bury every single one of them publicly, starting with Miss Vale." Monday morning arrived with the rumble of federal vehicles pulling into Bellcrest University's main parking lot. Students pressed against dormitory windows, watching black SUVs with government plates parked near the administration building. Imani stood in her apartment kitchen, coffee growing cold in her hands as she watched the news coverage on her laptop. The reporter's voice carried barely contained excitement. Department of Education investigators have officially opened a civil rights investigation into Bellcrest University's handling of discrimination complaints. This follows the viral incident where Professor Everett Halden cut off graduate student Imani Vale's hair during class. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages of support. For the first time in a week, Imani felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. Outside the administration building, dozens of students gathered with homemade signs. "Justice for Imani" and "Fire Halden Now" covered poster board and cardboard boxes. Someone had organized shaved-head solidarity caps that students wore proudly. The crowd erupted in cheers when Provost Norbury emerged from the building looking haggard and defeated. Reporters swarmed her immediately. "Provost Norbury, will you be cooperating fully with federal investigators?" Norbury's voice cracked slightly. "Bellcrest University has always been committed to student safety and civil rights. We will, of course, cooperate with any official investigation. What about Professor Halden's employment status?" Norbury paused too long. The silence felt damning. "The university board has voted to suspend Professor Halden indefinitely pending the outcome of all investigations." The student crowd exploded. Cheering echoed across campus. Someone started chanting, "Justice served! Justice served!" And others joined in until the noise became overwhelming. Inside her apartment, Imani sank onto her couch and cried. But this time, the tears felt different. They felt like relief. Her phone rang. Solomon's name appeared on the screen. "Did you see?" she asked, without saying hello. "I saw." His voice carried quiet satisfaction. "Federal investigations don't happen unless they have real evidence, Imani. This is what accountability looks like." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Nolan Pierce called a press conference outside the Student Union building. Cameras gathered as he stood nervously behind a podium, his face pale but determined. "My name is Nolan Pierce," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm the student who recorded Professor Halden assaulting Imani Vale." Murmurs rippled through the small crowd of reporters and students. "I want to apologize publicly for laughing during the incident. I was scared, and I froze. But I also want everyone to know that what I witnessed was deliberate, cruel, and completely unprofessional." His confidence grew as he spoke. "Imani Vale deserves justice. Professor Halden deserves consequences." Students applauded. Several reporters shouted follow-up questions, but Nolan walked away quickly, having said what he needed to say. Imani watched the coverage from her apartment and felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Genuine gratitude. Nolan's public confession gave her story independent corroboration from a white male witness. It felt like vindication. But victory lasted exactly 6 hours. At 7 o'clock that evening, anonymous email accounts began flooding social media with leaked correspondence allegedly from Imani's academic files. The messages painted her as emotionally volatile, academically struggling, and difficult to work with. One alleged email from a teaching supervisor read, "Miss Vale seems unable to accept constructive criticism without becoming defensive and confrontational. Her emotional reactions disrupt collaborative environments." Another claimed she had filed frivolous complaints against professors before. The leaked messages spread faster than the original assault video. Imani Lied began trending on campus social networks. Comment sections filled with cruel speculation about her motives and mental health. Worse, witnesses began disappearing. Talia Redden sent a brief text. "I can't testify anymore. I'm sorry. They threatened my job." 2 other former students withdrew their statements within hours. The younger professor, who had secretly provided information, suddenly refused to return calls. By 9 o'clock, Bellcrest's disciplinary office had escalated the charges against Imani. The new accusations included academic dishonesty, harassment of faculty, and disruption of university operations. The letter threatened immediate expulsion if she didn't appear for a hearing within 48 hours. Social media turned vicious again. Comments questioned everything: her credibility, her motives, even her sanity. The solidarity caps disappeared from campus as quickly as they had appeared. Imani sat in Solomon's hotel room near midnight, staring at her phone screen through tears that wouldn't stop falling. "They're going to win," she whispered. "They always win." Solomon pulled the phone gently from her hands and set it aside. "The institution protects itself," she continued, her voice breaking completely. "It doesn't matter what he did to me. It doesn't matter how many people he's hurt. They'll destroy me before they admit guilt." Her shoulders shook as the weight of everything crashed down at once. The assault, the humiliation, the false hope, the systematic destruction of her credibility and future. "I can't fight this anymore, Dad. I just can't." Tuesday morning, sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains, but Imani remained curled on the couch in yesterday's clothes. Her phone sat silent on the coffee table, finally drained of battery. She hadn't moved in hours. Solomon watched his daughter from across the room, his heart breaking with each shallow breath she took. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her freshly shaved scalp looked vulnerable in the morning light. "I'm not going to the hearing," Imani whispered without looking at him. "I can't face them anymore." "Imani?" "No." Her voice cracked. "They win. I get it now. Fighting back just gives them more ammunition. They'll twist everything I say. They'll make me look crazy." Solomon sat beside her carefully. For the first time since this nightmare began, his judicial composure crumbled completely. "I failed you," he said quietly. Imani finally looked at him, surprised by the raw pain in his voice. "When you were little, I taught you to keep your head down, to work twice as hard and stay quiet when people hurt you." Solomon's hands trembled slightly. "I thought dignity and excellence would protect you from the worst of it." "Dad!" "I was wrong." The words came out like a confession. "I taught you endurance when I should have taught you resistance. I made you believe silence was strength." Tears filled his eyes as he continued. "Every time someone treated you unfairly, I told you to rise above it, to be better than them. But I never taught you to fight back." Imani sat up slowly, seeing her father's vulnerability for the first time in her adult life. "You were trying to protect me." "I was protecting myself," Solomon said bitterly. "I was terrified that if you fought too hard, they'd hurt you worse. So I made you smaller. I made you quiet." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic outside. "I spent 30 years on the bench believing the system worked if you followed the rules perfectly," Solomon continued. "But watching what they've done to you, seeing how they protect predators while destroying victims," his voice hardened. "The system only works for people like Halden." Imani reached for her father's hand. "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure you know how to fight." Before Imani could respond, gentle knocking interrupted them. Solomon opened the door to find Marisol carrying a small canvas bag, her expression unusually serious. "I brought you something," Marisol said, settling into the chair across from them. "Something I should have given you days ago." She pulled out an old cell phone, the kind with physical buttons and a tiny screen. "This belonged to my nephew, Ricardo. He went to Belcrest about 5 years back on a partial scholarship." Marisol's voice grew heavy. "Kid was brilliant. Wanted to study social work. Help families like ours." Imani leaned forward, sensing the importance of what was coming. Halden taught his required behavioral sciences course. Ricardo was the only Latino kid in a class full of rich white students. Marisol's jaw tightened. That monster targeted him from day one. She pressed play on an old voicemail. Halden's voice filled the room, dripping with contempt. "Ricardo, your pathetic attempt at academic discourse today was embarrassing. Perhaps you should consider whether someone of your background truly belongs in higher education. Students like you drag down the intellectual caliber of this institution." Imani's stomach turned. The cruelty was identical to what she'd experienced. "There's more," Marisol said grimly, advancing to another message. "This one's from 2 weeks later." Halden's voice returned, even more vicious. "I'm recommending you be removed from the honors program. Your emotional instability and inability to handle constructive criticism demonstrate unfitness for academic excellence. Perhaps manual labor would suit your capabilities better." Solomon's hands clenched into fists. "Ricardo started having panic attacks," Marisol continued. "Stopped eating, couldn't sleep, finally dropped out mid-semester and never recovered." Her eyes flashed with old pain. "He works construction now, still has nightmares about that classroom." "Why didn't you report this?" Solomon asked. Who would have listened to a janitor defending her dropout nephew against a celebrated professor? Marisol's laugh held no humor. "But now you've got national attention. Now they can't ignore it." Simultaneously, across campus, Nolan was making his own discovery. Frustrated by the leaked emails attacking Imani's credibility, he had been digging through his cloud storage accounts, searching for any additional footage from that terrible Monday morning. Most phones automatically backed up videos and photos. Nolan rarely checked these files, but desperation drove him to examine everything from that week. There, buried in an automated backup folder, was a file he'd forgotten about. Additional footage from after Imani left the classroom. With shaking hands, he pressed play. The video showed Halden calmly cleaning scissors while addressing the remaining students. His voice was perfectly audible. "Some of you look disturbed. That's understandable. But discomfort serves a purpose in behavioral modification." A student's voice asked nervously, "Professor, was that really necessary?" Halden's response chilled Nolan to his core. Pain makes people obedient. That's the point. Miss Vale will remember this lesson far longer than anything I could have taught through conventional methods. The footage continued with Halden explaining his pedagogical philosophy to the shocked students. Psychological pressure breaks down ego barriers. Students become more malleable once their sense of identity is destabilized. Nolan's hands shook as he realized what he possessed. This wasn't educational experimentation. This was deliberate psychological abuse, captured in Halden's own words. He immediately called Imani's legal team. By Tuesday evening, the hotel's suite had transformed into a war room. Attorneys reviewed the voicemails and new footage, while reporters waited outside for statements. The evidence was devastating. Halden's own words destroyed every defense his legal team had constructed. He couldn't claim educational intent when he explicitly described causing pain for obedience. National media outlets began requesting emergency interviews. The story was exploding again, but this time with ironclad evidence of systematic abuse. Imani watched the attorneys prepare emergency motions to present the new evidence, finally understanding that her fight wasn't over. It was just beginning to get serious. The federal courthouse steps swarmed with reporters and cameras as Imani emerged into the morning sunlight. Microphones thrust toward her face like weapons, while photographers snapped pictures relentlessly. Solomon walked beside her, his judicial composure intact despite the chaos surrounding them. Nolan followed nervously, overwhelmed by the media attention, but determined to support Imani publicly. The lead civil rights attorney stepped to the podium first. "Yesterday, we uncovered recordings that expose Professor Everett Halden's systematic abuse of students," she announced. "These are his own words, captured on audio and video. The attorney pressed play on a portable speaker. Halden's voice echoed across the courthouse plaza. Pain makes people obedient. That's the point. Reporters scribbled frantically. Camera crews zoomed in on the speaker as Halden's cruel philosophy played for the world to hear. Students become more malleable once their sense of identity is destabilized, Halden's recorded voice continued coldly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several reporters shook their heads in disgust. Within hours, every major news network replayed the damning recordings. Social media exploded with outrage as Halden's "pain makes people obedient" statement went viral nationwide. The effect was immediate and devastating. Former Bellcrest students began calling news stations, finally finding courage to speak publicly. Maria Santos, the Latina student who had dropped out years earlier, appeared on live television describing how Halden mocked her accent until she suffered panic attacks. "He didn't just criticize my English," Maria said, tears streaming down her face. "He called me uneducated and culturally inferior in front of 30 classmates, week after week, until I couldn't function." Another former student, James Wright, revealed on social media that Halden had deliberately sabotaged his graduate school recommendations after James challenged him in class. "I lost my career before it started," James posted. "Halden told me directly that defiant students don't deserve opportunities." The avalanche of testimonies buried Bellcrest's remaining credibility. Meanwhile, on campus, faculty members began openly criticizing university leadership. Professor Linda Martinez publicly resigned from her department position, stating she could no longer work for administrators who protected a predator. "We all knew," Professor Martinez told reporters outside her office. Halden's behavior was discussed in faculty meetings for years. The administration always found excuses to avoid action. Her statement shattered Bellcrest's defense that Halden's abuse was unknown to leadership. Provost Celeste Norbury found herself under siege during a hostile television interview that afternoon. "Dr. Norbury, university emails show your office received complaints about Professor Halden dating back 5 years, the interviewer pressed. "How do you explain the lack of action?" Norbury's polished composure cracked visibly. "Those complaints were investigated appropriately at the time. But yesterday you claimed the university was unaware of any problematic behavior." "I meant significant problematic behavior. Is cutting off a student's hair not significant?" Norbury's face flushed red. "That incident has been taken out of context by activists seeking to damage our institution." The interviewer leaned forward. "We have Professor Halden's own words stating he caused pain deliberately. What context justifies that?" Norbury stammered incoherently, contradicting her earlier statements repeatedly. The interview became a public relations disaster, shared millions of times online within hours. Outside Bellcrest's administration building, protesters had grown from dozens to thousands. Students, faculty, and community members carried signs demanding resignations. Chants of "accountability now" echoed across campus, while news helicopters circled overhead. Inside his luxury apartment, Halden watched the coverage with growing fury. He paced frantically while his attorney tried calming him over speakerphone. "This is character assassination," Halden shouted at his television. 20 years of distinguished service destroyed by one emotional girl and her mob. His attorney's voice crackled through the phone. "Everett, those recordings are extremely damaging. We need to discuss plea options." "Plea options?" Halden's voice rose to a shriek. "I'm not pleading to anything. These people are jealous of my success. They're destroying education itself. As evening approached, Imani finally stepped to the microphones for her first public statement. The courthouse plaza fell silent as she began speaking. "Professor Halden didn't just cut my hair," Imani said, her voice steady and clear. "He tried to cut away my identity, my dignity, my sense of worth. He succeeded temporarily." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "But humiliation only thrives when institutions protect the people who cause it. When universities care more about reputation than students, predators like Halden flourish." Her calm dignity contrasted sharply with Halden's recorded cruelty. Public perception shifted dramatically as viewers saw her strength rather than victimhood. "I'm not fighting just for myself," Imani continued. "I'm fighting for every student who was told their pain didn't matter, for everyone who stayed silent because they thought no one would believe them." The crowd erupted in supportive cheers. Late that night, Belcrest University's president called Norbury to his private office. His face was grim as he closed the door. "Celeste, the board met in emergency session tonight," he said quietly. "They're demanding someone take responsibility publicly for this disaster." Norbury's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" The president's expression was cold. "They're considering making you the university's scapegoat." Thursday morning arrived with unusual quiet outside the federal courthouse. Inside, every seat was filled. Reporters lined the walls with cameras ready. Students from Belcrest sat shoulder to shoulder with faculty members who had finally found their courage. Former victims clutched tissues, preparing to watch their abuser face justice. Professor Everett Halden entered wearing an expensive navy suit. His gray hair was perfectly styled. He walked with the same arrogant stride he used in classrooms for decades. His chin was raised high, eyes scanning the crowd with familiar superiority. He took the witness stand like he owned it. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor began. "Professor Everett Halden, Behavioral Sciences Department, Belcrest University." His voice carried that familiar condescending tone that had terrorized students for years. The prosecutor smiled coldly. "Let's discuss your teaching methods, Professor." For the first hour, Halden maintained his polished facade. He described his classroom techniques as innovative psychological conditioning designed to strengthen character. He claimed students needed controlled discomfort to grow intellectually. "Modern students are fragile," Halden explained smugly. "They require firm guidance to develop resilience." Then the prosecutor played the first recording. Halden's voice echoed through speakers. "Pain makes people obedient." "That's the point." The courtroom stirred uncomfortably. Halden's confident expression flickered briefly. "Can you explain that statement, Professor?" "That was taken completely out of context," Halden replied, but his voice cracked slightly. "Academic discussions often involve theoretical concepts that—" The prosecutor cut him off. "Let's hear from your students about these theoretical concepts." One by one, former victims testified. Each described identical patterns: public humiliation, deliberate targeting of insecurities, psychological intimidation disguised as education. The testimonies painted a horrifying picture of systematic abuse, spanning decades. Nolan Pierce stepped forward next. His hands trembled as he approached the microphone. "I laughed when Professor Halden cut Imani's hair," Nolan admitted, his voice breaking. "I was terrified. Everyone in that classroom was terrified. We laughed because fear controlled us completely." His honesty sent shock waves through the courtroom. Several observers wiped away tears. Professor Halden created an environment where cruelty seemed normal. Nolan continued, where we became accomplices to abuse because speaking up felt impossible. When Nolan finished, the prosecutor turned back to Halden. Do you still claim your methods were educational, Professor? Halden's composure finally cracked. His face reddened with fury. These students are weak, he shouted, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. They need psychological pressure to succeed. They're too soft, too emotional, too entitled to handle real education. The mask had completely disappeared. Years of hidden cruelty poured out in front of cameras and witnesses. Without firm correction, they remain children forever, Halden continued ranting. They need someone strong enough to break their delusions and force them to— Thank you, Professor, the prosecutor interrupted. No further questions. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Even Bellcrest representatives looked horrified at what they had protected for so long. Provost Celeste Norbury quietly gathered her things and slipped out through a side door, realizing the university could never recover from this association. Thursday evening, news networks interrupted regular programming with breaking announcements. Bellcrest University's president had resigned effective immediately, while emergency board meetings continued deep into the night. Friday morning arrived with helicopters circling overhead like mechanical vultures. News crews packed the courthouse steps, while protesters filled the surrounding blocks. Students wore shaved head caps in solidarity. Faculty members clustered nervously near side entrances. The entire scandal had exploded beyond Bellcrest's walls into a national reckoning. Judge Patricia Morales emerged from chambers with preliminary rulings that would reshape everything. The court authorizes criminal assault proceedings against Professor Everett Halden, she announced. Her voice carried across the packed courtroom. The evidence demonstrates deliberate physical and psychological assault disguised as education. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Imani gripped Solomon's hand tightly. Additionally, civil lawsuits against Bellcrest University will proceed without institutional immunity protections, Judge Morales continued. This court finds systematic suppression of discrimination complaints spanning multiple years. The university's legal team looked devastated. Bellcrest had lost its protective shield completely. Outside, reporters surrounded Provost Celeste Norbury as she read her resignation statement. Her polished facade cracked under aggressive questioning. Did you personally suppress assault complaints, Provost Norbury? Were donors involved in protecting Professor Halden? How many victims were silenced by the university? Norbury fled toward waiting cars without answering. Meanwhile, Bellcrest's board conducted emergency damage control. 3 administrators were terminated immediately. The university's largest donors withdrew funding publicly. Federal investigators froze education grants pending corruption reviews. Former victims received formal apologies and settlement negotiations within hours. Then came the moment everyone waited for. Halden emerged from the courthouse flanked by desperate attorneys. Rows of silent students lined the steps wearing shaved head caps. Their quiet dignity spoke louder than any shouting. For the first time in his career, Halden faced a room he could not control through fear. Reporters swarmed aggressively. Professor Halden, do you regret assaulting your student? Will you resign from academia permanently? How many other victims exist? His attorney pushed through the crowd, desperately trying to shield him from cameras. Halden's arrogance had completely vanished. He looked smaller, older, defeated. No comment, his attorney repeated frantically. No comment. The crowd watched silently as the man who terrorized students for decades scurried away like a cornered animal. Inside the courthouse, Bellcrest officials approached Imani with restoration offers, full academic honors, graduation guarantees, financial compensation. "We want to make this right," the interim provost pleaded. Imani looked at him steadily. "I don't want personal favors. I want institutional reforms. I want policies protecting future students from predators like Halden." The officials exchanged nervous glances. Real change would cost more than money. Friday night, Imani returned to Marisol's salon. This time she smiled genuinely while examining tiny new hair growth in the mirror. 6 months later, Saturday afternoon sunlight streamed through massive windows at the National Education Reform Conference in Washington, D.C. Large banners hung across the convention center's main hall, announcing the keynote speaker, Imani Vale. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Educators, administrators, civil rights advocates, and students filled every seat. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically throughout the room. This wasn't just another academic conference anymore. Everyone knew they were witnessing history. Solomon Vale sat in the third row, his judicial composure barely containing his pride. Beside him, Marisol adjusted her best dress nervously. She had never attended such a formal event before. On Solomon's other side, Nolan Pierce checked his phone anxiously. He now worked full-time with student protection organizations, but public speaking still terrified him. "She's really going to change everything," Nolan whispered to Solomon. "She already has," Solomon replied quietly. Backstage, Imani smoothed her navy blazer and touched her hair gently. 6 months of growth had created a beautiful natural crown around her head. She wore it proudly now, no longer hiding or apologizing for who she was. Conference organizers bustled around her nervously. "The cameras are ready, Miss Vale. Are you prepared?" Imani nodded calmly. "I've been ready for months." She walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. Imani waited patiently, remembering the terrified girl who once gathered severed hair from a classroom desk. "Thank you," she said finally. The room fell silent instantly. 6 months ago, I was just another graduate student trying to survive academia quietly. I believed keeping my head down would protect me from injustice. I was wrong. Her voice carried clearly through the packed auditorium. No microphone feedback, no nervous stammering. Pure, confident truth. A tenured professor assaulted me in front of classmates because he believed his position made him untouchable. For weeks afterward, the institution that should have protected me instead tried to silence me. They offered money, threatened my future, and questioned my sanity. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Everyone knew the story, but hearing it directly from Imani still shocked people. But something beautiful happened during that nightmare. Students, faculty members, and staff who had been afraid for years finally found their voices. We realized silence only protects abusers. The applause built again. Imani waited for it to subside. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Veil Initiative. The large screens behind her displayed the program's logo and mission statement. Solomon leaned forward in his seat. This scholarship and legal advocacy program will protect students facing discrimination, abuse, and institutional retaliation. We will provide legal representation, financial support, and counseling services. Most importantly, we will ensure no student ever fights alone again. The audience erupted. Marisol wiped tears from her eyes while applauding fiercely. "Dignity matters more than institutional prestige," Imani continued. "A school's reputation means nothing if it's built on silencing victims and protecting predators." She paused, scanning the crowd confidently. Bellcrest University, under completely new leadership, has implemented sweeping anti-discrimination policies because students demanded change. They created independent oversight committees. They established anonymous reporting systems. They banned professors from using humiliation as pedagogy. More applause filled the auditorium. Meanwhile, Everett Holden awaits criminal trial in complete disgrace. Academic circles have abandoned him entirely. His tenure is gone. His reputation is destroyed. His victims are free. The crowd's energy intensified. Justice felt tangible in the room. But our work isn't finished, Imani said firmly. Across the country, students still suffer in silence. Administrators still protect powerful abusers. Institutions still prioritize money over human dignity. She stepped closer to the podium's edge. The Veil Initiative will change that. We will investigate complaints universities ignore. We will fund legal battles students can't afford. We will amplify voices institutions try to silence. The standing ovation began before she finished speaking. After the conference ended, crowds surrounded Imani with congratulations and support pledges. She smiled graciously while networking with potential donors and partner organizations. Then she noticed a young black girl standing shyly near the back wall. The child couldn't have been older than 12. She wore her hair in beautiful natural coils and clutched a conference program nervously. Imani excused herself from the adults and walked over slowly. "Hi there," she said gently. "Did you enjoy the conference?" The girl nodded quickly. "My mom brought me because she said you were brave. What's your name?" "Zara." "I wanted to tell you something." She looked down at her shoes nervously. "I used to straighten my hair every week because kids at school said it looked messy. After I heard about what happened to you, I stopped hiding it." She touched her natural coils proudly. "Now, I tell anyone who doesn't like it that they can't decide what beautiful means for me." Imani felt tears building in her eyes. This was why everything had been worth it. She knelt down to Zara's eye level and smiled warmly. "Nobody gets to decide your worth for you ever again." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.